What's going on, you guys? My name is Jay Fritz, and in today's video, we're gonna be talking about a special piece of equipment that I've grown to absolutely love, the Sigma 150 to 600mm contemporary lens. I'm gonna go over a handful of topics in this video, starting with why I decided to purchase this lens, who it is intended for. We're gonna go over the build quality and ergonomics. We're also gonna discuss the autofocus capabilities, image quality, and finally, we're gonna do a little bit of a comparison with the new Sigma lens, which is the 60 to 600mm. There are two key factors in why I went with this lens. A, I wanted to get into wildlife photography, and B, I was on a budget. Now, starting off with the price point of this lens, I was super fortunate because the time that I decided to actually pull the trigger, they just so happened to put this lens on sale on Amazon. So it was right around I believe $800 opposed to the original $1,000 that it typically runs. And the primary reason I wanted this lens in the first place was for wildlife photography. So in the last few months, I've really been able to test out this lens in a handful of scenarios that were super fun. So I'm gonna be sharing a handful of those images and videos over the course of this video and kind of cross-referencing them as I talk about different aspects of this lens's performance. So let's talk about the actual construction and the ergonomics of this lens. One thing I will say about any Sigma lens that I've ever used is that the build quality is fantastic. The lenses are made of metal and hard plastics that give it enough weight to feel like a quality lens without being so overpowering that you can't carry it around for a day-long shoot. Another thing I've noticed about Sigma's lenses that I absolutely love is just how smooth their focal length rings are, as well as the actual focus ring. I mean, they're super smooth, it feels high quality. For someone that comes from a cinematographer's background, I love a smooth pull rather than something that is either clicky or just feels like there's no tension to it and that it's just gonna slide out automatically. It takes a good amount of shaking to really get it to go anywhere, and even then, it's still pretty sturdy, it doesn't extend all the way. It's just a quality built lens. This lens features a handful of different switches along the sides, and one thing that's really cool about this lens in particular is that you can actually purchase a little mount ring that allows you to connect this lens up to your computer and download and custom install some software that allows you to control all of the settings within the lens. Stuff that you can't control within the camera or anything, which is pretty dang cool. So if you want to put in the extra work and pay for that additional adapter, that's something that you do have the ability to do, which is pretty cool. I personally haven't done it. I watched a video on someone that did utilize that feature. It seems like if you really want to dial in the absolutes of this lens and get the best autofocus performance out of it, that is definitely an option you can look into. I'm not too terribly worried about it because honestly, the Canon R5 is so incredible in general with eye tracking and just being so sticky with its autofocus that I haven't seen much of a need for it. So that's kind of my perspective on it, but it is a really cool feature nonetheless. Another great feature about this lens is that it's fairly lightweight for what it is. And most of these telephoto longer lenses get to be pretty dang heavy. And after a long day of trekking around, especially climbing up hills to photograph eagles and everything, it can be an absolute bear to carry something around, especially when I'm pairing it with something like my Canon C70, which is pretty heavy in and of itself. But for the most part, it's pretty lightweight, and I've had no issues slinging it around my shoulder and trekking around full days with it. Yes, I do get a little bit sore, but it could be a lot worse. Another fantastic ergonomic feature of this lens is the ability to rotate this little knob right here and go right into vertical mode if you want to get portraits. It's super nifty while you're photographing wildlife. If you want to get video for a reel opposed to getting wide video, it's a super cool feature and something that I absolutely love about this lens. All right, you guys, so let's talk about autofocus. This is obviously a key feature to any lens intended for wildlife photography, especially if you have fast moving targets like a flying eagle or an animal running or anything like that. Overall, with autofocus on this camera, I give it a 7 out of 10. It pairs pretty dang well with the R5, considering how incredible the R5's autofocus is. But we do have to take into consideration, this is an EF lens mounted to an RF system. So I do have to use an adapter, and that does, I think, take a little bit of a toll on the performance that we're getting out of it. You know, if it was an intended RF mount lens from Sigma, I think it would perform a little bit better, but Canon's not allowing any third-party lenses to do RF lenses right now. So yeah, you know, it is what it is. I guess we just have to deal with it for the meantime. But of course, to get the best autofocus performance out of this lens, you do have to have the proper settings set. So once I switched on continuous autofocus, eye tracking, animal tracking, the lens kept up really well. So I was gladly surprised with that. Now I'm gonna show you guys one clip where I actually filmed the tracking of how this camera locks onto an eagle's eye while it's sitting up in a tree. Now, obviously it's a stationary target. It's not super difficult, but it really locks onto the eye of the eagle, and the lens kept up really well with it, which was surprising and really cool to see. There were also a handful of scenarios where the eagles were flying and I was still able to lock focus on their eye. And after a little bit of enhancing between topaz denoise, I was able to really clear up my image and get it looking super sharp again. Now, one downside I will give to this lens, and I'm sure this is with any telephoto lens, is the manual focus. You know, it's not really intended to be used with this lens, but when you do have to use the manual focus, if you're on a tripod and you're trying to get a cinematic sequence and you're starting with the focus point on a near subject and going to your far subject, it's a very long focus pull. It just takes forever to get over from one subject to the next. So that is one downside. I'm sure you'll find that with any telephoto lens. Intend on using autofocus pretty much solely. Now, the primary visual things that differentiate a high quality lens and more of a cheaper option lens is gonna be your sharpness, the amount of noise showing up in the image, your colors, your contrast, and finally, the amount of bokeh you're getting in the blurred out portion of the image. I would give this lens an overall 6 out of 10. Not that great, but again, we have to remember and take into consideration that this is more of a budget option that still performs incredibly for what it is. With the proper post-production and enhancing, honestly, you can make portfolio images out of this lens, which is really cool considering it's, again, just an $800 lens. Now, just to be clear, this video is not sponsored by Topaz in any way whatsoever, but I do really want to emphasize just how important it is to have a software like Topaz to pull out the full potential in your images, because trust me, it was very discouraging early on when I was taking images. They were super grainy, they weren't as sharp as I'd like them to be. But then once I was able to utilize that software to bring out that full image, I mean, it honestly blew me away. And a few of my friends that use the same software with the same lens have kind of said the same thing. They're just blown away at how sharp the images turn out and just how clear they become. Honestly, considering it is a budget option for someone getting into wildlife photography, it is the perfect option on the market. I do not believe a better lens exists. It is raved about. You watch any other YouTube videos on it, people absolutely love the performance they pull out of this lens. And this is typically a stepping stone for most people that get pretty in-depth with wildlife photography. That's what I plan on doing. So for me, to have this lens as my first learning lens to kind of get an idea on what it's like to photograph wildlife and what I need in a good wildlife photography lens, it's been the perfect stepping stone for me, and I absolutely love it. Now let's talk about the new cousin of the Sigma 150 to 600, and that is the Sigma 60 to 600. It's a super cool lens. I don't know a ton about it right now just because I have not ever actually had it hands-on, but from what I've been seeing, it's a really unique focal length. However, I know it is in a fairly more expensive price bracket than what you'll find this 150 to 600 millimeter at. So I'd still say if you were on a budget like I was, go with the 150 to 600. It is the perfect price point, and it is such a high quality lens. I could not recommend it enough. All right, you guys, well, that's gonna be it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed this review of the Sigma 150 to 600. If you have any questions about the lens, please drop them down in the comments. I'd love to answer. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more gear reviews. I have the goal of hitting 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. I know it's possible, and with your help, I can absolutely make it happen. So please subscribe to the channel, stay tuned. I have a lot more content coming soon. So with that said, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and we'll see you in the next video.